A few days ago, someone at the very end of our meeting said, "Could you say something about self and no self?" I said, maybe it'll find its way into a talk. But before starting on that, I want to say something about this word meeting. I used it very passionately the other day in saying, anything that comes up can be met with this gesture. Meeting, meaning the two, no longer two. Me and my fear, me and my anger, me and you whom I meet. Maybe one feels one has to do something for this person. That's separation. Meeting is a direct entering. I'm right now talking about a meeting with someone. Direct entering into what somebody says. Not remaining on the outside, talking to that person. Specifically, the question came up, somebody saying, what do you mean meeting fear? And already, as she was saying it, I realized, let's drop that word. It's not a good word right now. Because it may imply I have to do something to meet my fear. I have to look at it. And how do I do that? How do I meet it? It's none of that. So let's forever be very flexible and light with words. Drop them if they're not helpful, misleading, and see if we can put it differently. When fear is raging or arising, how quietly can the listening be to what's happening? Even that sounds dualistic. There's no listening to it. There is just what is there, embraced by awareness. But one can notice becoming quieter and quieter and quieter in the presence of what is there, meaning old habits of resistance, the body resisting, bracing against this fear, revealing themselves in this awareness. And if they reveal themselves, they need not continue. Resistance need not go on. If it goes on, let it reveal itself, the physicalness of it, the mentalness of it, the ideas. I can't stand it. I got to get away from this. And physically, all the wrinkling up of this organism against itself, which is so utterly futile. What's there is there. It doesn't need to be wrinkled up against. The habits have been formed early on, but they do not have to persist. At least they can be irradiated with attention, with awareness. Reactiveness arising physically, mentally. Let it be seen, watched, heard, listened to. So, in this complete vulnerability and openness, openness is always vulnerable, at least it seems this way. What's vulnerable is the personality. Awareness is not vulnerable. It just sheds light, brings to light, allows stuff to be seen, felt, heard in its habitual ways of developing and winding down, whatever. No need to direct it, no need to control it. This is one of our strongest habits, needing to control ourselves and each other. How quiet can we become in the presence of feeling the desire for control stirring or in full-blown presence? One person said, if I can't control, what's left of me? Nothing. To find out, to directly experience that maybe most of our situations and conditions need not be controlled, particularly not in the obscure and unaware ways in which it happens habitually. And with that realization, maybe it doesn't need to be controlled. One realizes how one exists in this controlling others and oneself and the situations. See, we're just learning, awareing, seeing, listening, hearing, discovering. And in this process, maybe some intelligence, some wisdom will begin to make itself felt. It's there all the time, but it's overlaid by clouds of habits like needing to control, or needing to control the other person who is controlling, trying to get him or her to see that they're controlling and to see that they can drop it. Which is still wanting to control someone. How quiet can we become? The quietness of realizing, understanding, seeing, discovering what is there, but not identified with it. Not identified with it. I don't know what I've used this word so far. Identification here meaning the thought, this is me. I'm a fearful person. I'm a controlling person. I need to be a better person. That's this identification with these ongoing conditioned processes that we manifest alone and particularly in relationship with each other. That's a huge step to see what's there and not be identified with it as this being me and that being you. Rather just meeting it all, letting it be discovered and wondered about and amazed at, being amazed at it. Because anything that comes to light is amazing. In darkness, it wasn't seen, it was taken for granted to be the right way of operating. So, maybe with this thing of identifying, we have sort of a bridge to looking at what is this self. And what are you talking about when you talk about no self? If one has been a student or disciple of particularly Hindu teaching, although in Buddhism too there is a self with a capital S and a self with a little s. After all, Buddha was born into the Hindu tradition. Although at that time it wasn't called Hindu, that's relatively late. So if one has learned and verbalized in that tradition, then actually a neat way of expressing it, the self with a capital S, being nothing of this personality, being our true self, not identified with this body, this physical development, with this story of my life, with all of my pictures accumulated about myself, strung together by memory. That's the self with a small s. Realizing it all and not identified with it in the Far Eastern, Indian way of verbalizing things is the big self, the true self. So, when we talk about selfie, let's leave that word alone for the time being, talk about personality, the personal. We already touched upon it the other day when we said we all create, or thought creates, the personal world. And each personal world is somewhat or very much different from another's. The way I see the world, the way I react to it, the way I interpret it, the way I see myself in it, my relationship to it, what I desire of it and what I'm afraid of in it, comes all out of personal as well as collective history, conditioning. Made up of memory pictures. One can just play with it, remember oneself as one was. As a baby, we have photographs. Maybe we don't. Some people go through incredible natural disasters, floods, fires, earthquakes. And usually what is mentioned by victims who speak to some news reporter as the saddest thing, unless one has lost members of the family, is that one lost one's pictures, one's photographs. Sometimes a person will hold up a water-drenched or fire-singed picture. That's all I've got left, my wedding picture. So there's a vast amount of accumulated memory pictures in this brain. Memory pictures of people, of incidents, conditions, oneself. Given continuity by some function of the brain that strings it together and feels as though palpably here was a unique person developing, evolving, and still here. So, what is really happening, and please don't take my word for it, I'm not trying to impress it upon you. It's for each one of us to discover in looking and wondering and questioning whether there is strong identification with this ever ongoing series of pictures and chapters of the story of my life. This is me, this is mine. This is my body, people say. And my body is different from your body. Yeah, two bodies are different. We know that. It's the odds for two bodies, just as two blades of grass, to be absolutely identical are astronomical, the odds. So we're not disputing that there are different bodies, different life histories, different, although at base so identical, so similar, desires and fears, desire for more, for love, for acceptance, for security, for entertainment, fun, happy relationships, and the fear of all of that not happening or having lost it. How do we differ in each other about that? But we're questioning right now this strong habit of identifying meaning, saying, this is me, this is what I am. Sometimes people say, I'd like to get to know you better. Tell me your story. And if I tell you my story, which can be a never-ending affair, and we love to tell our stories and hear other people's stories, then what you get to know is a story. Somebody just wrote me a note. It came in through the mail. Saying, I feel I want to know you better and better. I feel I really don't know you. And my response was to say or write back, I trust that you can know me completely one day. Not because I would be able to tell my whole story. Do you know what I mean? You seem to have some inkling or some real strong feeling what I mean. Can we know each other completely without necessarily knowing each other's story? I'm not condemning it, it's fun. Stories are always fun. We love to laugh and we love to cry. But what does it mean to know each other completely? It's the same thing we're trying to say with this meeting. Here, not separate. So, I'm already at the end. Haven't started developing this whole thing of what is the self, what is the personality, the identification. This is me, the thought that all my accumulations, and these accumulations are not only pictures and remembered incidents, remembered aspirations and disappointments, remembered pains. These are all our possessions. Do we realize that we possess all of that and don't really want to get rid of it? Are really afraid of losing it? That sometimes comes to surprise, as a surprise to someone who's so suffering from unhappy love, loss of a loved one, unhappy, torturous, traumatic childhood. And yet, somehow or other, it has become one of our possessions, part of our inventory. I'm not making fun of it, please don't think that. We're looking at it, we're unearthing it to the light of day. The attachment to our possessions, may they be happy memories or sad memories. Of course, we may want to get rid of the real obsessing ones, because we don't want to be obsessed all the time. And yet, sometimes when all ongoing obsessions and thoughts running cease, then one gets scared when there's nothing going on. I must be something, I must exist as something. So, can we acknowledge or discover how attached and identified we are with our possessions? to which belong our memories, remembered past experiences, ideas, our possessions. Somebody mentioned something about a person constantly talking sort of a blue streak at this person about their political convictions and wondering how long can one listen to that? Our political attitudes and opinions are treasured possessions, aren't they? Maybe not for the people in here. But even that needs to be tested out. I remember one person once, I was at a Krishnamurti gathering there, and afterwards one person said, "Why does he always talk about nationalism, our attachment to nationalism?" I was an Englishman. He said, "I'm not attached to my nation." And then the Falkland Island affair broke out. And it was amazing to see over the television news Englishmen and women by the hundreds, by the thousands, waving the flags at the departing ships there, going to rescue the Falkland Islands. The national feelings had been aroused. So one can't be too sure that one is free of such identifications. Somebody else told me that being in this country thinking I'm not attached to America, and then living abroad for a while and becoming very defensive as all these Germans were attacking the Americans. It was amazing, he said, to see that come up. So let's be amazed to see things come up in relationship and not immediately jump to their defense. Because this is another aspect of the self or the personality, the me or the I, call it what you will. Important, deeply rooted aspect is to defend our possessions. Somebody slighting them, attacking them, or comparing them in an inferior way to some others. What does it do in this organism, which is conditioned for thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of years to defend his own? Originally, the family, the food, the drinking source. Although there's several people who've recently been to the Serengeti who tell me about their experiences there, and saying how amazing it is to see all these animals grazing together or resting. Lions usually are resting and sleeping. Only at times of hunger, need, getting something to eat out of a flock, a herd. But after that is grazing at the very drinking spot in front of a rock where the lions are lying, sleeping, yawning. So, for animals, the defense of territory, at least in places such as the Serengeti, has not become a program, the defense of territory. There are other animals where it is definitely, you can see with the birds, little birds chasing big birds out of their area. But it is still an instinctual, which means an immediate thing, which is also immediately, once the bird is gone, it's forgotten. It's not chalked up, we have to watch these birds, and maybe ally ourselves to make a campaign against. This brain does that. So our defenses become very elaborate and turn into attacks, wars against others. But defending the possessions, can we watch it and realize what all our possessions are? our looks which change over the years. If one is stuck on identifying with a certain look, one is into trouble. It changes. Only by moving with what's happening and not identified with anything about one's possession is there peace and openness and in touchness with all. What else are our possessions? Let's just name them a little bit, because this is stuff to get one's teeth into, or one's eyes and ears into. One's talents, abilities, one's job, one's production, one's book, or books. What a possession. What an identification with it. Now this is me extended out there in all the bookstores, in the reviews, hopeful in people's minds, and the fantasy knows no end of fantasizing about this. With the birth of a book and the development of it, the proliferation of it, I can only see two ways. Either one is obsessed with it or sick with it. Somebody mentioned it to me. It's like a virus, concerned with one's book, or one forgets about it, doesn't think about it. That's nothing that the will can do, it just happens. So one's work, one's works of art, one's productions, artistic productions, one's work in the office, identified with it? I'm doing better, faster than the other one? It's everywhere, isn't it? It's in the air. The virus is there. We all carry it and we all impart it to others or catch it from others. Identifying with, this is me, this is mine. It's not why. One could say, well, why do we do that? And that sort of puts a lid on the whole investigation. Let's just watch how it operates as it is watched. So that we can learn. And by learning, seeing through these things, maybe they lose on their own in importance. It's when one understands more the truth of it. And maybe finds out something about what one truly is. If that doesn't take place, if there is not some insight into the truth of oneself, that one is none of that stuff. All of that stuff is going on, one isn't denying it. One has been conditioned. One loves one's pictures and one's house, one's husband and wife and children, lovers, friends. But to see it from a new perspective, is that what is meant by self and no self? The personal and the non-personal? See, we shrink, a thought gets so afraid of a moment of there being no identity. Everybody experiences this every once in a while in a retreat. Sometimes, for some people, it's utter bliss, finally free from all of this weight and contraction. For other people, it's scary. Not the moment of no identity, but the thought, what am I now? I'm nothing. What will happen to me, to my loved ones, or my possessions? And with that thought arises fear or terror. Sometimes people tell me, after such an opening, the thought comes up, I don't want to go there, not yet, maybe later. So, how can we see our moment-to-moment identification? Meaning, just to come back to more concrete, and please ask questions in meetings later if this is not clear, because it is so important. Meaning, the belief, in the beginning unshakable, never even questioned belief, this is me, this is what I am. And the more I accumulate, materially, psychologically, spiritually, spiritual accumulations, whatever, all the insights I've had and all the, all the paths I've gone, all the koans I've passed, all the practices I've absorbed, it's all spiritual possessions. Seeing this going on and not saying this is me. This is what I am. This is what I can still become. So often, this is what we say. Right now I'm this, but I want to become that. Meaning more possessions. Or an exchange of possessions. All this stuff I know hasn't brought me anything, the material stuff, I want to drop it. And now after spiritual possession. Paths, teachers, gurus, practices, traditions, rituals, ceremony. All identified with. And if you ask yourself, am I identified with this? Don't just say, no, I'm not. Hold it. Keep it suspended and wait what happens when somebody questions it or casts it aside or puts it down, makes a snide remark about it. Then can one see the snide remark as a snide remark, or does one feel personally attacked? This is what's meant by identification. If you attack my rituals, you're attacking me. Personally, I feel wounded. Not just wounded, but there's a reaction arising to hit back. To avenge. That's a beautifully fruitful question to ask oneself as one notices how one loves something, savors something, wants to keep it. Am I identified with it? Do I feel this is me? Me and mine? The question may sound too abstract. How can we make it concrete? I think the concreteness is in what happens when we lose it, when it gets old and stale. Somebody said that in a meeting. I was so surprised at it himself. I'm still afraid of death, of dying. Well, a very, very common thing, so common that most of us think this is a natural way of being afraid of dying, afraid of death. Because there's always people then qualify and say, I don't mind dying, but I don't want to die under agonizing, painful circumstances. But how does one know at all. How can one know at all how one would be under these circumstances? One right now fantasizes from the way one feels now, healthy, alive, and enterprising. But it's not our circumstances and us. We are our circumstances. We change with them. Maybe our perceptions, our sensitivities change. I don't know. I would leave it completely open how it can be or how one is with agonizing fear and torturous pain. Maybe the biggest torture is the resistance against it, the fear of it, the not wanting it, fighting it. But what is the fear of death? Can we look at it? For one right now, what is the fear of death? Do the possessions come into play? The fear of not having any longer what I know has given me pleasure, what I know I am. Fear of not knowing what I will be after that. The need to know what I will be and the inability, the impossibility of knowing that, although we can invent fantasies about what we will be after death. Beliefs. I just read one person's belief. She's dying now, believing that she will meet everybody she has loved and she's helped in her life. And we will be dancing in the galaxies. It was a beautiful way, such a loving way to describe, and no fear of going to the other side. This is what she calls it. Convinced there's another side to go to. So that alleviates for this person the fear of dying, or eliminates it. And I'm not putting it down. It's each one to do what they need to do. But I want to know what it is like when there is no fantasy. The dying of fantasy about being somewhere, being something, being somebody, with somebody. All this is concretely felt as activity of the known and knowing, which can be our bliss if projected in the life after death, and can be our torture if projected into bad things happening, painful, frightening, terrorizing things happening. What if I go to hell? Or in this life, what may happen to me? So what I'm interested in is the dying of the known, dying to all that is known and fantasized about me and my world, and living in that. Living in the freedom from fantasy for whatever duration there is to this freedom of fantasy. It's our true ground. Fantasy comes later. So while alive and kicking, can there be a dying to one's identities? Seeing through them. Realizing all of a sudden that's not what one is. all these accumulated identifications. And when those are quiet, the electricity, as it were, is shut off. That circuit is at ease. It's not vitalized right now at this moment of just being here. Singing birds and breathing organism, beating heart. Isn't it just an all-embracing, all-containing emptiness, which has no need for being somebody or something? We will end here for today.